Hi everyone, my name is Jacob. I'm the host of Doors Within Us podcast, and I'm really excited to be here with Yng-Ru Chen, and we're actually in her gallery, and she has been nice enough to have us here. So yeah, we had Ying with us in the podcast, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. So just backstory, I live in Brookline, Massachusetts, and I was trying to take a break from work, and I was just walking down the street on Harvard Street, which is in College Corner, not far away from my home, about 5 minutes or 10 minutes away, 5 to 7 minutes. And I was just walking down Harvard Street, and I came across the Praise Shadows Art Gallery, and fortunately for me, I met the founder. I was sitting just right inside, and we had a very good conversation. And today we're here, so.
Sure, thank you so much, Jacob. Yng-Ru Chen, I go by Yng. I am a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm Taiwanese, I'm American, I'm a Bostonian, I'm a New Yorker, I'm a lot of different things. And right now I exist as a gallery owner, someone who works deeply with artists, as I have my whole career, but this is the first time that I've entered into this physical space on my own as an entrepreneur and as an owner. So in 2018, I started Praise Shadows as an art consultancy. I was still living in New York, and I did not understand or could even fathom back then having a physical space, because New York City is so expensive. And then in 2019, late 2019, I moved back to Brookline, where I grew up, after moving here from Taiwan, and I came back to Boston to raise my family and to kind of have a little bit of a calmer life after 20 years in New York. And then the pandemic hit, and about 6 months later, I came upon this real estate opportunity to take a lease in the neighborhood I grew up in the neighborhood where my children go to school, and I decided to open an art gallery. So I know we will talk more about that, but that's really the crux of what I do and who I am right now.
Can you just talk a little bit about, so you grew up here in Brooklyn, right?
I came when I was 5 years old.
5 years old.
Yeah.
So just give us how, from Taiwan to Brookline and New York, it sounds like it was a crazy place. You had to come back to Brookline. Could you just give us, first of all, how Taiwan was growing up? I know to 5 years old is pretty young.
I mean, I was born in Taiwan at a point where the country was still very much evolving into a full democracy. And so my mother and father are, really the first in their families to have college educations. Taiwan, for those who don't know, is a little island that really punches above its weight class, right? It has a very strong economy, it has a very strong democracy, and yet it is in this kind of tenuous position geopolitically. My parents were, my father was a dentist, my mother was a pharmacist. They both just retired, but when they decided to come to the United States, it was because my father wanted to get a graduate, like a postdoc.
Being a dentist.
Yeah, so he was so specialized, became a periodontist, and he came here to take coursework for 1 year, or to get a degree for 1 year. And so we were only supposed to be here temporarily. And then after about a year, they decided they wanted to stay, that they really enjoyed it. And this is why I don't have an Americanized name. They never bothered because we were supposed to go back. And by the time, we had stayed a few years, I remember my father said, "Do you want to change your name now?" And I thought, well, that's weird to go to school tomorrow and say, "Call me, Annie," or I think he wanted to call me Grace, and I said no, I can't be called Grace. So my identity has always been in these two places, Taiwan and Boston. And then the first year we lived in Brighton, Alston, and then they moved to Brookline because of the ESL program. So I didn't speak English, and the Brookline public school systems had and have English as a second language, so that's why they decided to live here. And I ended up graduating from Brookline High School, the public high school here, and I really loved growing up here. I still see my teachers here all the time, and a lot of my friends have moved back as well. It was a really nice place to grow up. And I felt a lot of openness, intellectual openness for different cultures. It's a very international community. As you are an international Bostonian, and we just happened to come across each other, right? So I really did feel that Boston and Brookline specifically, when I wanted to leave New York, although it didn't occur to me for a few years, I realized that I had been searching for a place like Brookline for a long time to raise my children and to give them a good public school education. And I looked all over the country, and I landed back to where I was. So it's been very surprising, very interesting, because when I moved here, there wasn't this sense of New York is the epicenter of the art world, and my husband's a journalist. So we were both in these industries where New York was so vital. But then everything changes, your life changes. And he had been working for a major news organization, and I had been working, for a company I really loved. And before that I worked for museums and auction houses, and by 2018, we were both doing our own thing. We were both freelancing. And that was the year that we realized we didn't have to pay to live in New York anymore to do our jobs, that we could do our jobs anywhere. And that was the impetus to move back to Brookline.
Your mom is a pharmacist, right? And your dad's a doctor. How did you end up being a...
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I always knew that I was not going to go into medicine, to practice medicine. I wasn't interested in it. I wasn't that good at science. I did fine. My grades were fine, but I was never passionate about it. I was much better in, writing, and I loved history. We didn't have art history classes growing up in the Brookline schools, but I took an art history class my sophomore year of college. And I went to this university, or this college called Williams College, which is in the Western Massachusetts. And when I went there, I thought I would become a psychology major. And so my whole first year, I took coursework that focused on that. But I soon started hearing everyone's talk about art history, and I didn't know what that meant. But I did know that everybody took an art history class, Art History 101. Even if you were a football player, a hockey player, a jock, you still took art history. And so my sophomore year, I took Art History 101, and I was hooked. I mean, I really learned so much about history in the world. I learned about Christianity through art history, to be honest, because I grew up Buddhist. I didn't understand or know much about the iconography or the history. And through, European art history, right, I learned a lot about different religions and cultures, and it just opened up a way of communicating the world to me, but through visual art.
And when you decided to do this, were they supportive of it?
My parents? I think they were supportive, but they didn't understand it either. And they, I think the only other thing that was acceptable for a long time was to be a lawyer. Yes. So I did plan to go to law school. I was studying for the LSAT and everything. And so actually, and I'm still very interested in this area of study, which is intellectual, cultural property, cultural repatriation, a lot of issues dealing with art and restitution. So when I was in college, the restitution of Nazi era art was a very big growing field. And then I worked at a time at Sotheby's in Chinese works of art, where you have to deal with cultural property issues, UNESCO, all of these very kind of deep, legal, but also just it's not. What I realized after a while, by talking to a lot of art lawyers, and I put that in quotes because what they all told me really was, you don't go to law school and study art law. You go to law school and you have to look at tax law, or you might look at, intellectual property or copyright, all those. You have to do all of these things before you really specialize. And so instead of going to law school, I decided to go get a graduate degree in arts administration at Columbia, which allowed me to take the art classes at the law school. So the law school actually had classes on this issue, but it was like it was an elective, it was like a fun class for them, for the law students. And then I got to take classes at the architecture school, which had like an architectural preservation program. So I kind of developed my own curriculum through that.
I bring this up because we have, just previous, some of the entrepreneurs that we've talked on the podcast, especially those from, Africa, or, Asia as well. Is, there is, being a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer is like the gold standard.
Yeah.
And trying to build your own career out of what you really like to do and set the foundation has been a common story.
Yeah.
And I think that is for you to do this and actually build where we are. For your reality to be something that we're sitting in right now, I think we inspire a lot of people.
Thank you. It's also a privilege too, right? Like my parents could not do this because when they were in school in Taiwan, you test, and based on what you test, you get placed in a certain type of curriculum, and that curriculum becomes your career. So, and there was no way for them to even think about doing art or anything that wasn't going to help them financially, because their parents were never going to help them financially because they couldn't. And, in some ways, because again, my parents were the first of their families to go to college, they felt immense burden in being able to provide, for a family that they want to have. So for me to be able to do this, yes, it is inspiring, but it's also because, the parents that I have before me, though they didn't really understand it, they made it safe for me to be able to do this.
There's always something to at least fall back to, right? Like that supportive environment. I think, so now going back to, so by the way, Taiwan, I love Taiwan.
Yeah.
I've been there. Great food.
Great. Yes.
We can talk about that later.
We have a podcast about Taiwan.
Yes, I think that's a great idea. But so you left Taiwan when you were 5 years old. Then you went back again, right? When you were.
I never went back to live, but I just, I would go back to visit. Yeah.
Did Taiwan in any way inspire you in just like conceiving this idea, or did you meet someone there that really gave you a sense of? Did you somehow contribute to this?
I think probably. I think not anyone specifically, but I think that Taiwan, again, as this place in the world that has great cultural influence and great not political, but great financial influence, but has always had to fight to be recognized, right? And so I come from people that are never going to be complacent, and we're never going to feel like this is we're set for the rest of our lives. Also, Taiwanese people are really, really fun, and there's a lot of joy, and there's a lot of persevering as well. There's immense positivity, I think, in Taiwanese culture, and you and I have talked about this. Compared to perhaps some other places in Asia. The vibe is like a really special thing in Taiwan, and and there's just I think it's the joy. I really do feel that way, but we also are a tiny little island that is trying to just keep itself protected, keep itself for many people, we want sovereignty. We want to be known that, it's a fierce democracy, and that should not be taken lightly. And I probably go into like every day of my life kind of feeling a little bit the same way. Like, I'm a very tiny person, and I often feel a little bit underestimated because of who I am, like in this world and in this space in America. So I know that there is a correlation.
I mean, everything you said is truly inspiring. I think it speaks to how, just based on like where we come from, there is some carryover in the way we think subconsciously,
Yes.
right? And that affects the output that we put in the output of our work and our lives. I think one thing that stood out in Taiwan was just the buildings were very just well designed. They had like a unique architecture, and I felt like there's art like inbuilt in people's minds from that standpoint. But beyond that, just to echo what you said, like the people are just so fun. It's so fun. Guarantee you, that was like one of the place I felt like welcome.
So cool.
Yeah, it was great food. But the food, man, the food
The
was
food.
the food was something else.
What was your favorite dish? What do you remember?
No, I'm not put on the spot.
Are you do you like seafood?
Actually, I had like several. I went to several restaurants where like I had a taste of like. Though I had like this pho that had like all this different seafood stuff in it. It was just so good.
When my mother comes back from Taiwan, all she does is cook.
Yes.
She's famous. She's famous. Like, we actually just had her 70th birthday celebration in Taiwan. So my cousin made a video, and there was a whole section of her and her basically banquets. She'll just cook, and there might be like 6 of us, and then there's like 12 dishes. But it is also what gives her joy. And the other thing that's interesting about Taiwan is there's a lot of different cultural influences, obviously, right? So for a long time, for 50 years, it was a Japanese colony. So I don't know if you had Japanese food there, but it's very, very good there too. And then, obviously the Chinese, the mainland Chinese influence. And there's just, there's something really special, like a combination or a synthesis of different cultures. Yeah.
No, I felt that. I kind of felt that. Yeah, that's just a really, really nice place, and I'm happy that you're kind of bringing that in here in this space, which is truly, truly, truly commendable. I want to go back for you as well as your kids, and perhaps one might feature in here in the episode. But can you just give us a sense of how that support network, your close family, kind of help you set this up? From 2018, I guess.
Yes, well, so 2018 was when I started Praise Shadows as a company, and again, it was just a consultancy then. I was, working with artists and working with a few companies, but I started the gallery in December 2019. No, December 2020. Sorry, and I moved to Boston. So I moved to Boston in September 2019, and then the pandemic hit March 2020. And then June 2020, I met the landlord about the space, because that's when the space was available for lease. And then I opened the gallery in December 2020. Yes, 2020. So, it's just been a kind of every few blocks of months, I find myself just kind of being like, oh, I'm going to make this big change. And this happened before the pandemic. I think that deciding to come back to Boston and being, my parents at that time were living here fully before they retired. So that was a big kind of advantage in a way, because I knew that if I needed to go to New York, which I was doing every month for work, obviously my husband was here, he was taking care of the kids, but if he also had to travel or was very busy, my mother and father at that time could also help. But we both have lives. I'm talking Devin, my husband and I both have lives where we value creativity, right? He's a writer, and he is constant. I mean, all he does is think about stories and ideas, and what is happening in the world that he might want to also kind of process and put together in his point of view. He's not a newspaper writer, he's a magazine writer. So he is really working on these long form, long lead stories and trying to find the most interesting way to tell it. And he's extremely wickedly funny. So that's another way, I really appreciate, like, you can get excellent journalism, but do it with humor, and you can do it, you can write he just wrote a big celebrity profile that isn't something he does all the time, but it pretty much went viral because it was like the biggest story. It was this Vanity Fair cover about Grimes, the singer.
Yes, Grimes,
Yeah, so my husband Devin wrote that story, and as he was reporting it, all of these really insane things kept happening. Like, he discovered she had a secret baby upstairs, and so there were, and like I would hear it as well, and I'm here at the gallery and I'm telling my staff, and we just love like this back and forth of kind of all of the things that are going on in our lives. And then every once in a while, I need Devin to sit here and be at the front desk because I can't be here or we're all busy. I mean, he doesn't do it that often anymore. I think on his like Instagram or Twitter profile, he says like, journalist and art handler at Praise Shadows Art Gallery. And yesterday we went to a really beautiful opening for something called the New England Triennial, which is an exhibition happening at the De Cordova Museum and at Fruitlands Museum, and Devin was wearing a Praise Shadows hat, which we have. People spotted him and said, and wanted to talk to him because I knew about the gallery. So that's really nice too. It was like we're both constantly just hyping each other up.
Yeah. I think it's so important, like this, especially small things like him sitting here and helping out. It goes so
The first time I ever met him was I read one of his articles for a magazine, and I had not met him in person yet, and I just laughed reading the whole thing, and then I happened to meet him at a bar.
Are you serious?
Yeah, that's how we met. But I was like, I read your article, it was really funny.
I have to digress here. So you just went to a bar, random bar, and you
I mean, no. Well, first of all, this was like 20 years ago, and but so way before social media. No, we had a mutual friend, but I was doing PR for a museum, so I knew I had to read these things, and I love writing. I'm a good writer, but I think when it's just like an artist, you can be really good at drawing, could be really good at painting or sculpture, but when you like take it there's something about what you've done that nobody else can do, right? It is like inherently what you have put out there into the world. I feel like that's what someone like Devin is really good at for his stories.
Shout out to you.
Shout out to Devin. But also he's a great, he's a very ethical, good journalist. So there are things that I respect a lot about the way, he does his work, because he doesn't compromise on, especially doing things like celebrity profiles. There's a lot that goes on between, like, I won't even get into it, but there's a lot. And then it's just like here, I try and do my business as ethically as possible because I want to do this for a long time. I want my artists to be around for a long time. And I truly believe if you try and cut corners and if you try and do things unethically, then it will come back to you.
For sure. I mean, I think overwhelmingly, just what I see on the Facebook page and online as well, it's just, I think overwhelmingly people are very receptive about just what you're doing.
I think it's just, this gallery is kind of, and this business is something that has been building up in me for a long time. And I think that's what happens with some people, not all entrepreneurs, because some people are serial entrepreneurs, so they're just trying to get the next thing going. I mean, for me, this is all of the things that I have done in my career, right? Which is, I was a PR marketing director for museums, so I know how to promote artists and promote shows. And I have done, different types of revenue stream projects with artists. I have done, so many, I've been an art specialist at an auction house, right? I've done so many different things that never was about climbing that corporate ladder so that I could be, the executive vice president or partner. I mean, honestly, I could not care less about that. And I did leave jobs even though, the companies would offer a promotion. I just knew if it's not the right fit for me right now, or if I've outgrown it, then I shouldn't stay. So when I started the company, there were so many things that were just like, here are the three main things that I care about. And you can see this actually in my presentation deck. First was obviously the exhibition program. The second was we have an art shop. So we have items that we either help create or we carry, and lots of art books.
Yeah, it's on the website too.
Yeah, it's also on the website, and we're expanding our space to accommodate. So we will have like an actual physical space instead of sharing it. It'll be in a few months.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, so. Yeah, I mean, all of that was, the art shop was really important to me because we're in a neighborhood where we have great local stores. And as a kid growing up here, I would go into these stores if I had, a few extra dollars or I had to buy a friend a birthday present, I would go into these places. And now that, my 12-year-old does exactly the same thing. And I also know that this is a neighborhood full of really, intellectually curious, intelligent people, but they may not have had the experience much of going into a contemporary art gallery. And so this space functions as like a hybrid space where we have art books and we have items that are made by our artists who are in the MFA Boston collection, but you can buy her work. Specifically, I'm thinking right now of an artist named Madeline Donahue, the very first artist I got into the Museum of Fine Arts Boston collection, and she's making beautiful limited edition wood flowers, painted flowers for Mother's Day. Her work focuses on motherhood. So just things like that where we can make artwork a little bit more accessible to people who may not have a lot of money to spend on art but are interested in being a part of the process. Even if you come and buy, we have these cute erasers from the Guerrilla Girls, which is the most famous feminist art collective. And they have this great, kind of pink standard eraser, but it says erase the patriarchy or eliminate the patriarchy, right? So like, that's a few bucks. It's less than $5. And we have teenagers coming in here and buying those little things. And A, it supports the artists, the Guerrilla Girls. Like I'm offering, or I'm buying from the Guerrilla Girls. And then B, every time you come out of here and you buy something, even if it's a few dollars, I'm like, hey, you're a future art collector, or you just collected art. Great. See, no big deal. And I really think it really should be no big deal, right? You don't have to buy something expensively, but if you find that drawing somewhere for $200 and the artist is selling it out of their studio, don't be intimidated. If you love it, then you should feel like buying it helps that artist continue to do something else or to continue their practice.
That's so exciting, and I think that's incredibly awesome.
Oh, but wait. That's the second part of the gallery mandate, and then the third is our mentorship program.
Oh, yeah.
So again, remember I told you my first internship was unpaid, and I almost left the art world because of it. From the very beginning, I started this mentorship program where we hire 2 high school mentees from local Boston public schools or Boston schools. And then they work here from about March through the end of the summer. And while they work here, they learn about the ins and outs of working at a gallery, how to talk to people, how to work with artists. But then they also have mentorship sessions with a professional curator from Boston. And so last year was our first year, obviously. We had just opened. And we had a high school mentee from Brookline High School and a mentee from Watertown High School. And then our mentor was Leah Triplett Harrington, who's a curator in Boston for the public art organization Now and There. And Leah took them on site visits, she took them to studio visits with artists, and then they the two students curated an exhibition, a group exhibition, and it did incredibly well. You know, we sold multiple artworks from that show, but more importantly, the mentees developed their voice as curators. And one thing I told them was, I want to see what a show looks like from the point of view of two 17, 18-year-olds. You know, what excites you right now about art? Who are the artists that excite you? And one of the things that was really funny is that I didn't really understand some of the artworks at first when I just saw pictures of them online. And then as we were installing it, I fell in love with all of the art, and I was so happy that they introduced me to artists. So, you know, so anyway, we now have we have a new mentor. Her name is Jen Mergel. She is Boston born and raised, you know, one of the most amazing curators I've encountered. And we have a high school mentee from Brookline again this year and one from Newton. And you know, it's just always fun to see what they come up with, and you know, what kind of art and what kind of show they want to put together, because I don't want my perspective to be the only thing that, you know, comes out here. I mean, I will help them edit the show. They still need a little bit of input, but it's really exciting. And then during the opening, you know, it's full of young people. It's all their friends, and it's awesome, you know.
There's so many dimensions that you're approaching that. I think one thing about your story is that once you face something that you thought this is something that has to be improved, or there is a way for us to, for you to make a difference in that, you actually implemented it into Create Shadows. But one thing about art, and I'm talking from an outsider, is like, we always feel that one is just incredibly inaccessible. It's difficult to access, rather. It's very expensive, and you have to be an artist to appreciate the work. So I think you have, like, you know, created a space where all those barriers are really, and beyond that, young people, bringing them into this mentorship program is really invaluable, and I think that goes a long way. For the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, one of the mentees from last year is deciding which college she'll go to, and you know, I'm really proud of her because she has been able to put this show on her resume, or on her application, and you know, it's not because of this, but you know, she's getting to pick between several excellent schools that are giving her, you know, great like financial aid packages, and I just know like she can go into this next step of her life with a lot of confidence. Definitely. You know, because she can have said, well, I've already worked with all these artists, I've already worked with these curators, and I've already worked with this gallery system. So now, you know, I think she's going to go to school in New York City. She's going to enter this like big time, and it'll just cut a lot of the friction, I think, for someone who's 18 and figuring out what they want to do.
Yeah, just one life, making that decision. It's powerful. Are your kids your mentees as well, the 12-year-old?
And I told you I'm my 9-year-old. But they, you know, they're funny. I often wonder, my husband and I talk about this a lot, because I'm like, wow, I did not grow up surrounded by artists, surrounded by writers, surrounded by this kind of conversation. I grew up surrounded by wonderful people, right? But it wasn't like this at all. So I'm curious to know what they end up looking to do or wanting to do. My daughter, I actually took her this weekend to New Haven because Yale, you know, the Yale University MFA program had their open studios, and there's this great nonprofit called Next Haven. They had their open studios too, and she loved it. I mean, she really absorbed all of it, and I could totally see her, you know, in one of those studios in college or in grad school. My son wants to be an engineer, so. However, all I see him do is build.
Okay.
Right, so he like is useless with his pencil. He can't write very well. He's not very good with that, but he will take things apart and put it back together. So I see both of them, and I see engineering as being extremely creative, right? Like if you are able to excel in that field, but then think creatively about it, I really feel like, you know, people like that can take over the world.
Definitely. definitely. And so the one is 12, the other one's 9. Oh, that's an interesting age.
Yeah. They're really different people too, but they've just been, they've been around art their whole lives. But I don't even give my daughter art lessons. Like she's very good at drawing, and I've never done that because I don't know. She now really loves writing. I just feel like they will find their own way, and eventually, like it'll all be processed into something that they package together. Yeah.
Yes. And when I think of, and I will go into just the partners, and we'll just talk a little bit about this because I think it's such an honor, and just for you to be so nice for us to be in here.
Of course.
And I would just love to get a little bit about just how you thought about the colors and just like the design itself.
So this space that we're in was originally, when I took it over, it was formerly the GNC vitamin shop. And which was here for maybe 4 or 5 years, and before that was a dry cleaner. When it was a GNC, I never stepped foot in here. I don't think anyone did, unless you needed protein powder or something like that. So it had like drop ceilings, really different tile floors, wall-to-wall shelving, and I just knew, I was like, just knock it all out. I was really fortunate because my childhood friend, Sam Batchelor, is an architect, and I just, asked him to help me. And this is the thick of the pandemic, and he did. He helped me kind of come up with, just the vision, which honestly is very simple. It's, we exposed the ceiling, but Sam was also the architect for the Mass Art Museum, which had just opened before the pandemic. So he had experience working and building a gallery, and that was really helpful. I remember he told me, because the ceiling used to be like the color of the natural dark wood, and he said, that Mass Art Museum ceiling we painted white and it looks really nice. And so this is like directly related to that. And then he connected me with his friend Shane Gibbons, who's a general contractor, and Shane is amazing. I feel like I just lucked out. Like nobody loves their general contractor and nobody loves their landlord, and I do. I love both of them. So, we just had, I had very specific ideas about, like, I wanted the floor to look like this, to have this kind of cement finish. But we did it. It was a process. And, I also knew I needed the space to be very flexible in terms of its layout. So these walls that you see here, I have 2 of them. They're on casters, so they can wheel anywhere around the space. And then my contractor, Shane, also built them to be art storage. So inside is another way for me to, save on space, although I have a full basement. But all of those things, again, we were in COVID time, so it was like, I have no idea how people are going to relate to space, how people are going to want to enter space as we do this. So let's keep it as nimble as possible.
And it's so incredible.
Well, thank you. I mean, and then we also have these big windows right onto the street. So I knew I wanted something that people would be able to have like a really clean sight line into, right? Nothing too distracting. Just the art needs to speak for itself.
Yes, it's mind blowing. So you mentioned the price, so we have the price shadows art partners, right? Can you just talk a little bit about that and how that works?
Yeah, I mean, the art partners really is like the original, the OG of it all. So, but I feel like just because I have a gallery doesn't mean I can't continue to help the artists with, commissions and projects. So like even just today, I was on a deadline for a public art commission that one of our artists had been asked to submit for. So, but that artist is extremely busy, so I'm their partner in it. Like I'm helping them with all of the ins and outs, the logistics, getting that material ready, and then, and then I have another deadline for, another commission. So those sorts of things, like the art world is, based in the gallery system, but it's also about getting artists exhibitions, about getting artists shows or public art commissions. That sort of opportunity is something that like I don't want them to miss out on. And oftentimes they are so busy because they, luckily are doing quite well. So I want to be able to support them if we can. And it's also to help them think like, have you thought about this opportunity? Have you thought about your work translating in this way? And that's why I think in our boilerplate, in our bio, we say, we do things that we haven't even imagined yet. And that's, I think, what I feel compelled to completely immerse ourselves with in terms of like what's happening in the world, what are people excited about. We can talk like NFTs. Everyone's excited about NFTs now.
That was my next question.
Well, one of my first clients in 2018 is a company called Snark.art, and I was their chief marketing officer. And Snark was working in the blockchain and art space in 2018. So I became very familiar and very entrenched in that world way before NFTs became popular again in 2020. And so, I feel like I am ready. I take risks if it feels right. I don't jump into things. I'm actually not even really in the NFT digital art space. If an artist wants to do something on it, we talk about it and we try and figure it out. I'm not like, that is not my bread and butter. That is not something I don't have any artists right now that do NFTs in that way. However, I do use blockchain for, like, all of this art here is registered on the blockchain. And we do that for a very different reason. And that is to build in secondary sales royalties for the art. I've been working with this company called Fairchain, and Fairchain was recently profiled in the New York Times. They are based in New York, but again, like, they work with blockchain, they work with the technology, but it's not about digital assets. It's about how do we use this really interesting technology, which is basically a ledger. It's great for accounting and things like that. But how do you use this technology in art? And one of the main advantages is being able to track that artwork through sales. And so currently, in the United States, if you, Jacob, bought a painting from me, just normal transaction, you give me X amount of dollars and I give you the painting. And then in 20 years, you decide to sell the painting at an auction because you see that this artist is doing quite well. Yes. And that price at auction now has tripled. Well, you get to keep the money. The auction house takes a commission, but the artist gets zero. Yes. And so what we're trying to do, and what I've always been interested in with blockchain, is the ability to build in those secondary sales royalties. So we've been doing it with Fairchain since March 2021. I'm like, yes, March. So we've been doing it for more than a year. And our show that was a solo show by an artist named Yng-Ru was 5 amazing paintings that had only ever been shown in Japan. And they premiered in the US here. And they were just, they're irreplaceable. They're works about the nuclear disaster and earthquake that happened in Japan 10 years ago. And
Was it really 10 years?
It was now 11 years ago, yeah. So those paintings were acquired primarily by one collector, which was also something I worked really hard to make happen, because I didn't want 5 paintings all over the place. If I could, I wanted them with one collector so that we could continue to do museum loans of these works easily. So it's actually one collector owns 4, and then this person's friend partner owns the 5th one. And it's all registered on the blockchain, which means that if the artists in 30 years or 20 years, if these works do end up being sold, the artist or her estate will at least get something from it. And I think that's really important. I think that's something that, as a new gallery, I was able to implement with confidence, because I knew everything about art and blockchain at that point, whereas a lot of people were still learning and they only knew about NFTs. And I think that's like a very specific, narrow way of understanding how blockchain and art can work together. And then, another thing is just like small galleries are often the ones that bring up artists and do, a lot of the legwork, and then the artist might hit, it really big. Yes. And then they would get poached by a bigger gallery. So one of the things that we also do on blockchain, and all of our artists agree and participate in, is out of their secondary sales royalty, they give a small fraction to the gallery as well. So we feel like we're part of this partnership. Yes. And that is where I find that, as we think about how we use new ideas or new technologies, I don't do it for everything. I really am very selective, but when I see something that I think could be pivotal and instrumental in how we move forward, I will completely go ahead and adopt it.
Yeah, this, and from what I see, based on what we're talking about from very early on, you think a lot about just one, like you have the experience, like you feel like you can do it.
Yeah.
And also there is, you really consider the other people you're working with, especially the artists. It's like at the front and center of
totally.
it, which is exciting. It's just really cool. It's amazing work. So for the third piece of the interview, I just want to, this is like the inspirational section. Mm-hmm. But before that, I just want to ask, like, how do you, it sounds like you do a lot of stuff, right? There's this aspect of it that you work with the artists to help them, increase other channels that they can make money, but also like highlight their work. Mm-hmm. You also manage this, you have a family. Mm-hmm. How do you manage stress?
I'm like pretty even-tempered, even-keeled. I am competitive. I was actually, I was like a Division I athlete, and that was like a huge part of my college career. So I've always done extra. Extra. I was the captain of the crew team. I was I just did all of these things, and I would, if I was given an opportunity and it made sense, I would do it. So I think a lot of that is just ingrained in me. Like I still get sleep. I'm not like a 4-hour sleep person. I just try and simplify everything else, if I can, which means, for example, moving here and having my children go to school 1 block away from the gallery, living, a 5 to 7 minute walk home. Everything kind of exists in this little triangle. And so yes, that makes it extremely convenient because, right now, like my parents are not in the US right now, so we have no childcare. It's just us and the kids, and it's great. It totally works. A lot of it is just, I'm lucky. I have a 12-year-old now, so she can help take care of a lot of things. But when we lived in New York, it was definitely challenging because I worked either full-time or part-time, so I always had someone to help me with the kids, whether it was a babysitter or when they were very little, we had an amazing nanny who was like a grandmother. But even then, I would rush home every day, trying to make sure that the woman who helped me could go home as well. So there's just so many other people that you have to like take into account when you live a life like that. Whereas now it's just me and my people. Obviously I have employees too now, and so I want to take care of them, make sure that they go home okay, that they don't, they're not overworked. And it's hard, like we're still a small team and we have so much going on. But I do my best just to be transparent about our schedules, what people are capable of doing. If somebody asks and says that they need to take a day off, of course, I have to agree, and I have to just figure it out and make it work. And I also think I'm running an art gallery. I'm not like an ER doctor. So, if I need to We don't do it very often, but if I need to close the gallery because like we just can't be here, I will. You know, it's okay. If you can't see art today, like just let me know. We'll make it work another day. But I think simplification is really important, and you know, trying not to take on too much beyond what you already have going on. I should definitely exercise more. You know, I should definitely like. I should definitely. I mean, you know, it's not like uncommon. So I wished I had more space and time to do certain things. But I feel so lucky that I have been able to like carve this out for myself. And it's not just like my family around me and like this immediate surrounding that's convenient. For example, the other day we had kind of like an emergency. We needed help with a framing situation. And my neighbor across the street, Tom at Picture Place, who's a framer, came by, helped me. In 30 minutes it was done and back on the wall. You know, and the artist, Helena, was just like, wow, you have it, like, you're so lucky, everything's around you. And that's partly, I exist in a community that is really helpful.
Yeah, it sounded like right timing, you had the right experience.
Yeah.
You took action at the right time, and everything just aligned. One thing that I really like for you to highlight as we end this conversation is, what will be your, what is something you'd like to share with, especially like, you know, the minority community. You know, we have, not by default, I mean, sometimes we grow up in families where taking risks is really hard, just based on the culture that we are exposed to. And you alluded to earlier, even as supportive your parents were, they didn't really understand what you're building, and it took a while. I mean, perhaps now we are here and you've built something really amazing. If you want to just please share with people that are listening to this or even watching this, like, how can they approach this in a way that is healthy? When I mean healthy, it's like they don't get overwhelmed, they don't come with the approach of like they're trying to prove something, but genuinely helping the people that they need to help.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think one of the things I did that I'm really happy I did was I established kind of a group of advisors. And they weren't like compensated. I didn't really ask them honestly for a ton. It was just more like, again, this is in my business deck. You know, here's my architect, I even credited my landlord. But you know, my legal counsel is my dear friend who is, talk about being an art lawyer. She has now achieved like art lawyer status. You know, she is the best. Her name is Yayoi Shionori, and she is someone who, you know, always has my ear if I need help. Always, usually on behalf of my artists too. So I feel like they can go to me, they can say, Yng, I have this contract or I have this project, but I need some legal advice, and then they know that I have the best person. And Yayoi was really instrumental in helping me set up my first contracts for all my artists and for my purchases. So, you know, for her, it was like pretty standard stuff, but for someone like me, it just meant so much to have her. You know, I also just had another woman that I had worked with who did communications, who, you know, came on as my advisor in that way as well. So I think having people in your corner to maybe help supplement all of those parts of your toolkit that you don't quite have at your disposal. Like, you're probably really good at like XYZ things, and I'm going to be good at other things that you need to delegate to me or you need that advice from. I think to find those people, but to find those people with like a really genuine, in a genuine way where it's really, I hate to say this, but like it was never transactional. It was never like, hey, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you. It was just like they believed in it. And the next time they ask me because they need something and I believe in it, I will support them as well. I think community is key. And it's hard to exist on your own as an entrepreneur and not have anyone help you or anyone, you know, kind of lift you up on the way. the flip side is, I also didn't really want people to tell me what to do.
Yes.
So, and I think that's the tricky part about being an entrepreneur is like, if you have a vision, you should fulfill that vision. You should listen to people. But I don't have partners in the business because I feel really confident in what this voice is. And so to put in, at this point, like another voice or another point of view in terms of the business or the programming, I think that could probably be difficult. So you have to look, it's a nuanced way of adding people to your community without taking advice that like you may not want or need, and then taking advice just, when you really feel like it's critical to you building what you're trying to build.
Exactly. That is so good. So the last, and by the way, behind the camera is Tiffany. I'll give a lot of credit to the work that she's done, and just amazing. So thank you so much for being here. But I think this question is like, so you built this incredible space, and I know it's gonna do really well. Just a gut feeling. And I know this is, I think I'm lucky that I'm at this beginning, so that 10 years from now, I'll be like, yes, I knew you. And this
And you knew all these artists.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And most importantly, I have the record to show it. I was one of the first people to, one of the privileged people to meet you. What do you see as a legacy, the legacy story of this place? And for yourself?
That is such a loaded question. I think for my personal legacy, I just want to be remembered as someone who was kind and someone who, just kindness. That's, or I tried hard and I did my best. I don't feel like I need to be famous. I don't feel like I need to do any of those things from like an egotistical point of view. On the gallery, on the other hand, right, like that exists beyond me. If one day, and I don't plan on this, but if one day, I want to pass it on to somebody, then that could happen. And that's why I didn't name it after myself. That's something that I did very deliberately, not because, again, I was planning on selling it or anything. It's just like, if it should have legs, then I want it to not just be about me. But I do want the gallery to be known as a place that incubated really incredible art and exhibitions in Boston and beyond. And I feel like I can say that confidently. I've talked about the museum acquisitions, but we have acquisitions happening right now with a New York museum, and we placed a work in a California museum. So we are not just a Boston gallery anymore, and I feel really excited about that. And so there's like the flip side of I want to emphasize that we do exist here, that this community has been very important, but that we have wings that can take us, anywhere in the world, because that's what our artists want. Our artists don't want to be shown in just one city. So I really hope that you'll see Helena in lots of different places, and you'll see all of our artists in lots of different places, and that's because that's what is best for the artist and their careers.
I really want to thank you so much for this.
Jacob, this
thanks.
is so nice.
This has been so much fun, and I will just say it again, just like the legacy part that you mentioned, and just from a personal point of view, and also how you see the power of what you're building. It's truly profound, and I can sense that it's very genuine too.
No, it's been a pleasure. I'm so honored, and this is the whole point. I wanted people to come from walking down the street and just come in and say, what is this?
So to everyone listening, we have Yng-Ru Chen here from Praise Shadows Arts Gallery and Partners, and it's been such an honor. Thank you guys. So I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.